The session today is all about 6 sensory phrases that you can use in your pitch. And when I say pitch, it means the point where you are in a webinar where you are about to explain what your offer is. This is Bushra back with another episode of the Persuasion Show. This is the show where you witness what happens when you mix honey, mustard, paprika, and then eat it with a chocolate croissant, which is to say completely unpalatable, but also disgustingly fun. And this is also the show where I teach you how to hack your way to rebuttal-proof arguments and back button-proof websites. And in today's session, we are talking about senses. So I see a lot of lame copy. Let me be very, very honest. I see a lot of lame copy, and not just by newbies, but unfortunately, or actually fortunately for me, by some of the so-called experts. And I think one of the biggest things that makes copy lame and your words honestly shitty is the fact that they are very shallow. They don't paint a mental picture. And when I say mental picture, it means that when I read your words, I should be able to feel like I'm there, to feel like my senses are engaged with your words. And that can only happen when you use sensory phrases. And the session today is all about 6 sensory phrases that you can use in your pitch. And when I say pitch, it means the point where you are in a webinar where you are about to explain what your offer is, or the point in your sales page copy where you are about to start talking about your product and the impact of your product on the person's life, or any situation where you are supposed to talk about your product. These sensory phrases will really take your pitch from lame to phenomenal. And side effects include an overflowing bank account and a sunny disposition, because who does not want a pitch that is phenomenal? If you're not one of those, please stop listening right now, because these sensory phrases are going to change your pitches forever. And God, I'm so excited to share those with you. So what are sensory phrases? What do I mean when I say engage your senses? Touchy, feely, itchy, scratchy, slippery, smelly words. So if you want your pitch to fly through objections like a warm knife slices through a slab of butter, or you know how, okay, I am a sucker for waffles, but there are times where I fall for pancakes. And when you have this stack of pancakes that's like dripping with syrup and there's whipping cream, and I like banana and strawberries on my pancakes along with a lot of Nutella. So when you have that stack of pancakes and then you put your fork in for the first time and it basically just kind of dives in and just slices through that stack. If you want that kind of smooth action for your pitch, before you need the sensory phrases, you need to have a killer offering and a strong value proposition, right? So it has to be a good offer. If it's a shitty offer, the sensory phrases are not going to do jack shit. So you need to have a strong offer and you need to have a strong value proposition. And we're going to do another session very soon on how to create strong value propositions. But for now, let us assume that you have a strong offer and a strong value proposition. Then there are certain really simple things that you can do that work at a more visceral level, right? The only job of those words or those techniques or those phrases is to get your senses engaged, to not have copy or not have words or not have a sentence or not have a paragraph that makes people like, oh, okay, they're not actively engaged. Their senses are not engaged. They're not feeling it. If that's not happening, then these tricks are going to help you big time. So that's really what the purpose of these sensory phrases are. People should be able to touch them and feel them with their mind's eye. And they used to have some substance, some okay, that's an interesting thing. I'm lost for words, which doesn't really happen. But it has to have some substance that engages their senses. And scratchy, slippery, smelly words actually do that. Now, the phrases that I want to share with you are along those lines. And each one of these phrases, I'll give you examples to actually engage a different sense. You don't need to use all of them, but just have them handy. So when you sit down to write about your pitch or about your offer, or, the moment of truth when you expose your product or service, these really help in getting the point across at a visceral level. So the first one is the phrase that engages our sense of sound. So can you hear the sound of, or you can hear the sound of. So don't just say, can you hear your PayPal notifications going ping? Instead, paint a more visceral picture. So for example, can you hear the rumble of their empty stomachs? It's not just saying, can you imagine them being hungry? Can you imagine them being hungry does not engage your senses. But when you say, can you hear the rumble of their empty stomachs, that gets the senses engaged. Similarly, can you hear the trumpets blowing and people celebrating, or people cheering, or people clapping? That engages your senses. You're not just saying, oh, can you imagine all the people celebrating around you? Because then their senses are not engaged. Or as you sit there hearing your children giggle and skip around you. So you're not just saying, imagine sitting there and your children are playing around you. No, you're using a phrase that gets their sense of hearing engaged. So every time you talk about something like this, make sure to mention that element of sound, how that engage their sense of sound. So make sure you talk about the particular sound of a certain thing that you want to talk about. Number 2. This is more on the sense of touch. So close you can feel its touch. So talk specifically about the sense of touch. As an example, your well-earned promotion is so close you can reach out and grasp it. So you're not just saying, oh, your well-earned promotion is very close to you, for example. Instead, engage their sense, because when you say something like, reach out and grasp it, in their mind's eye, they can see themselves reaching out and grabbing it. So their sense of touch is engaged. You can feel your next loan payment breathing down your neck, all prickly and hot. So this is a very interesting way to use it, because this is, again, both of these examples, these are not real things that they can touch. But when you use these phrases, it engages their sense of touch, even if it is not something that they can actually touch. So instead of just saying your next, which is really common, your next loan payment is looming ahead. It's a very distant phrase. It does not affect me at a visceral level. It does not make me feel, it does not engage my senses. But when you say something like, you can feel your next loan payment breathing down your neck, all prickly and hot, now I'm listening, because now I can actually feel it breathing down my neck. Next up, number 3, nothing beats the taste of. So now we are talking about the sense of taste. And you don't necessarily have to use this exact phrase. You can use whatever phrase suits your purpose at that point. But the idea is to not just distantly talk about something, instead engage one of their senses, in this case, the sense of taste. So nothing beats the sweet, tangy taste of success. Now that is, you're not just saying nothing beats success or nothing beats the taste of success, for example. Instead, you're describing what that taste looks like, what that taste feels like, and that engages their senses. Again, it all boils down to the same thing. Take one of their senses and engage it. Number 2, imagine the dark, irresistible taste of coffee as it awakens your taste buds. So this is, by the way, this particular phrase, or this usage of engaging your taste buds is really common in retail industry, especially retail industry involving food. But you don't necessarily only have to use it in a setting where we're talking about food. It can be used in any context. But instead of just saying, imagine sitting down with your coffee, for example, you're talking about something, you're talking about working from home, for example. So instead of just saying something like waking up in the morning, making yourself a coffee and curling up on the sofa with the coffee, instead of just saying that, if you say something like this, now they can actually, because that's what human beings do when we read something that engages our senses, we can actually feel ourselves going through this. So when I read this sentence, and if I were someone who was kind of addicted to coffee or liked coffee, then yes, I am one of those who does not like coffee. And if you want to judge me for this, go ahead and judge me. I am sitting here judging you because you like coffee, and then you go ahead and judge me because I don't like coffee. That's a lot of judgment. But using this phrase for someone who is addicted or who loves coffee in the morning, they can actually feel that coffee in their mouth as they read this. So it's not like, oh, I'm just curling up on the sofa with a cup of coffee. It's very visceral. Next up, imagine laying eyes on. And this is so common. So this is the sense of sight. What I see most often is most people will say, imagine looking at something for the first time, right? And that's great. But if you say something like, imagine laying eyes on something, and I'm going to read out just one example phrase for you, and you will know exactly what I mean. So I could have, if I were a regular person, I could have said something like, imagine walking into your new home for the first time, right? This is very typical. If you're in the real estate industry, for example, you could say something like, imagine walking into your new dream house for the first time. But again, it's not visceral. It does not make me feel like I'm actually living that experience. I'm actually seeing my new house with my own eyes. But if I use something like this, imagine laying eyes on your own house for the first time, taking in all the tiny details, the staircase, the patio, the wall to ceiling windows. Now I am in that house and I am looking at all those details. I am living that experience. I'm not just reading that sentence like an outsider. Now I'm inside that sentence. I'm living that experience that you described because you engaged my sense of sight. Really small change, but makes all the difference. Next up, can you smell and this is again, talking about the sense of smell. So can you smell and doesn't necessarily have to be something that actually has a smell. You can make up a smell if you want. But again, you don't just say, so as an example, I could have said something like, imagine making $10,000 while you slept, right? That's a typical sentence that, oh my God, so many people use. I want to kill myself because I see it so often. But what if you chose to engage their sense of smell and saying something like, can you smell the crisp new smell of the $100 bills that you earned while you slept? Right? Now they can actually, it not only engages their sense of smell, but also engages their sense of touch, because in their mind's eye, they're seeing themselves riffling through those $100 notes and also smelling that sweet new smell of $100 bills. But by the way, I despise that smell because, side story. Because when I was doing my training as an accountant, and if you don't know that I was an accountant, shame on you. You should know all about me and stalk me all over the internet. But anyway, I was doing my accounting and we used to have these annual cash counts, and they would take us into these bank vaults and banks. Okay, my V's and W's have an issue. Bank vaults. And there's kind of floor to ceiling, just new crisp bills. And you'd like, okay, where do I start counting this? Do I really have to count this? So naturally, you don't end up counting all of it, but that smell is, I despise it. But there are people who find it really sexy and invigorating. And even if they don't find it sexy and invigorating, when you use it in this sense, it really engages their senses and makes them crave that smell, because you're talking about effortless money making, which in and of itself is a lie, but that's a topic for another, episode. But I hope you get what I mean. Next up, this is the movement, right? This is the sense of movement. So not just a regular, your basic senses, but a sense of moving. So when you instead of just using a word, a regular static word, when you use a word that implies movement, people can actually feel themselves move through that situation. So as an example, they will stand open-mouthed as you whoosh past all objections to a well-earned promotion. So you're not just saying people will stand open-mouthed as you get your well-earned promotion. Instead, you're saying as you whoosh past. So it implies movement. And when I'm reading this, now my senses are engaged because it is not a static word. It makes me feel engaged and part of the copy. And really, that's what we want. That's what we all want, because really the first thing that gets people by is for them to pay attention. Once they pay attention, then the next step is to get them engaged, actively engaged with your words and your copy. So not just reading your words like a bloody outsider, it's like, oh, okay. Instead, you want them to read these words and in their mind's eye to be able to see and experience those things. And these phrases and these examples would actually help you to do that. So next time you sit down to write something that involves any of these situations where you're painting a picture of how their life is going to be with your product or your service, think about using these words, because these words affect people at a visceral level. These words make them feel like they're living that experience, not just reading it as an outsider. So this was it for today's episode. What I really want you to do is to use some of these visceral phrases and go to thepersuasionshow.com, find me on iTunes and leave a really nice review. Okay, it doesn't have to be nice, but leave a review and use some of these sensory phrases. Also take a moment to share this and leave me a comment. Also, you can get your copy of the handy dandy worksheet so you can actually see these phrases in print, and so you can kind of model your own phrases after it. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here with me. I'm going to see you really, really soon with another episode. And until then, stay safe and send me love.